somehow I am not a geneticist and I continue to get asked to come back to this session. I have a meat science training. I'm a meat nerd and I continue to get asked to help with sheep genetics. So it does make me feel a little inferior. I am a little bit nervous to head up a genetics panel, but no, I'm on Sheep Genetics USA Board of Directors. Just finished my first year, I guess technically. Came on last year at this meeting. And last year we really felt that after 3 years of Sheep Genetics USA, we kind of needed a redirection, if you will, or kind of inspiration. So we organized a 2-day event into Fort Collins, which the panel, you guys need to come sit down, please. Make me feel better, less nervous. Invited a group of producers, educators, and extension of about 15 people, and invited somebody to moderate, paid somebody to moderate that's outside of the sheep industry, because we can sit in this room and talk about all the things that we've done, all the things that we want to do, but are we truly going to make any progress? And so we had Mr. Lee Leachman from Leachman Cattle moderate our panel, or our 2-day event, And what we really wanted to focus on is, what should our priorities be, research priorities be moving forward, 2024 and beyond. And so he led us through a pretty gruesome 2-day event, starting out with just what's right in the U.S. sheep industry, what's wrong in the U.S. sheep industry, what's confused, what's missing, and then made us all feel uncomfortable, made us all answer questions we didn't want to answer, and then just so smoothly led us into what should our vision be for the future, some strategy to move forward, and some really helpful things that the cattle have already been through, so don't go there. And then also ended it, and I think this is the most important piece of saying you have to be accountable for what you did in these 2 days. And this group needs to hold the Sheep Genetics USA board accountable for the 7 priorities that are coming forward. And before I let them get started, I think one of the funniest things from those 2 days is all of these guys push the limits and they think outside the norm. And one panelist, or in particular, that isn't here today, one of the members, he's always my go-to for what is the craziest thing that we can do? And I think he really brought to the table some BHAGs. And if you're familiar with Superior Farms, we do a lot of BHAGs. So that's big, hairy, audacious goals. And we set those for ourselves every year in all of our teams. And what Cameron did is he came out in the very beginning and he's like, you know what we're missing? We're missing a chute-side test that will tell us not if we're susceptible or resistant for OPP, but that ewe has OPP. And I need the results to be in 30 seconds or less because I'm scanning, and I need it to be under $1 per head. And everybody in the room was like, okay, Cameron, no, that's not going to happen. But as we talk more to the panelists today, and you'll see on our priorities, we have, of the 7 priorities, a chute-side test for OPP that will be less than $1 a head. We did not include the 30 seconds. But that is truly something that will make genetic progress, improve productivity, and increase profitability. And I think that's what we're all after, and that's why we're all sitting in genetic stakeholders. So that's all I wanted to share. I'm going to turn it over to the panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll see what comes out of there from here. So whoever wants to start.
I'll start. Can you hear me? Okay. I'll tell you, Chris, that you don't have to feel inferior at all. Because I feel like I'm the most just a farm kid from Utah. But my name's Gavin Blomquist. We raise Suffolk sheep, Rambouillet sheep. My family's been doing this for over 50 years. Not sure what generation I'm in, but we've been doing it for my entire life. I'm the terminal sire breed rep for NSIP. Also, in 2021, we revived the National Ram Sale in Utah, and Tom and Casey made the mistake of making me the manager. So, but we're blessed to be a part of that. Yeah, that's all I got.
My name is Isaac Matchett. I am from Michigan. We keep a flock of about 1,600 commercial polypay ewes, high health status flock. Ewes are lambed on pasture in the spring. Lambs are left with mom for 70 days of age, weaned, and then finished in confinement. My family's had sheep for a number of years, so we've had lots of opportunity to make mistakes and lick our wounds and try to learn from that.
I'm Ryan Boner. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
I'm from Central Wyoming.
We have to hold a little closer.
Our family does better.
Yeah, that's better.
How about in the back? Our family runs a larger scale Western sheep operation. We're probably about 2/3 Targhee and 1/3 Rambouillet, Western range herd, and then we also run some commercial cattle, cow-calf operation, and black and red Angus seed stock as well.
And I'm Andrew Weaver. I'm the Extension Small Ruminant Specialist at North Carolina State University in Raleigh. So I would think I was the Southeast rep and the Katahdin hair sheep representative on the Young Guns group, but work quite a bit with the Katahdin breed as well as some other breeds as well. And grew up in Michigan and then bounced around some through grad school and ended up in North Carolina. Been there about 3 years now.
Yeah, so we had a very diverse group of individuals. This is only a small representation of that. And it was representative of all industry segments and geographics of the U.S. sheep industry. And so one of the things I want each of you to cover, if you would, is what is a key takeaway that you went home with from another segment? And did you come away from the Young Guns panel, or 2-day event, excuse me, I keep saying that, with a better understanding of what somebody else in the segment is going through, or of a different segment is going through? And then how can we shape common solutions? And they had these questions ahead of time, so it's not like this is hard, guys. They had homework.
So I think, as you pointed out, Carissa, it is a very diverse group. It's a very diverse industry with many different segments. And probably, well, kind of two key takeaways there is segmented as an industry. We don't have a lot of leverage or power or numbers to work for a common goal. But with respect to those segments, I think a lot of our challenges are common, and there may be common solutions that can benefit all the different segments. That was kind of my takeaway, that we all come from different parts of the country, different production systems, different breeds of sheep, but really have common, in a lot of cases, common driving economic factors and common needs and goals within the industry. So some common tools can probably help fix those problems.
Well said. I agree. It was a very diverse group. It was really fun to get to know some new faces and new people, and to just sit there and discuss our problems, issues, and potential ideas of how to solve it and move forward and work on not only genetically but economically moving the needle a little bit, not only at our own operations but as a nation. It is definitely not a one-size-shoe-fits-all kind of operation, kind of industry by any means. And so just being able to identify, what can help some operations isn't necessarily going to work for yourself as well, but to identify as an industry some of the things that we really need to work on as a whole group collectively.
Yeah, and I think I agree with what's been said already, and kind of building on that. I think especially even after day one of our meeting, kind of my takeaway going into that evening was, wow, we have a lot more in common than we have different. I came into it, expecting, especially coming from the Southeast, what I think is important or what needs to be a priority is probably going to differ from the Western Range folks. And in reality, we got in that room and sat down and started chatting, and a lot of the topics we brought up were very similar. Maybe how we address those might need to vary a little bit depending on our production systems and environment, but same overarching challenges. And so I think that's encouraging as we think about, we don't have 100 different priorities that we all need to address depending on our different regions. We narrowed it down, and you'll see it here in just a minute, to just a handful of priorities that we thought were really critical, and I think we had quite a high degree of agreement between all of us in terms of what those things are. Two of the big topic areas that we discussed that I think many of us brought to the table were, how do we streamline data collection so that we can get that information collected on farm and then get that to our genetic evaluation program and then get that information back in a very usable form to help us make selection decisions moving forward. And then building on that, just the need for greater phenotyping and making sure that we have the information, the data collection that's necessary so we can make those accurate selection decisions. And then, any potential novel new traits that we need to consider moving forward, especially as it relates to, I think a lot of us talked about some of those adaptability traits, feed efficiency, longevity, udder health, things like that, to really we've focused for a long time on output traits and maybe kind of shifting gears and looking at some of those inputs as well. That was a common topic of discussion, I think, from my memory on our time together. So, long story short, I think a lot of those things were similar, regardless of our production systems, which is encouraging, and hopefully we can find some solutions to those moving forward.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think one of the eye-opening things, and that was what was nice about having Lee there, was he could kind of put some, with his knowledge and experience with the beef cattle of how many animals are going to be needed to make something like this go. It became very apparent to me that we need something to get our larger Western Range commercial producers involved. And that's where, part of that's cost, and that was discussed of how much, it's going to cost to process a tissue sample or do a genotyping on an individual. And then the other one was, and that's where kind of the light turned on Cameron's thing was, maybe we do develop this OPP shoot side test and allow a commercial producer to keep more ewes in his flock for a longer period of time, produce more lambs. If we could get something like that going, and then once they get their feet wet in that, then maybe they start looking at, oh, hey, I can do this, or oh, I can do this, where we're already spending that time. And there was a number of things that was discussed. Part of it was a lot of the producers that I know in my area, they don't have the manpower or the time, so there was a lot of things discussed about, like taking one band of sheep and really doing the genotyping and making that group potentially like the group that you pull all of your replacement females from, or something like that. So having Lee there really, opened my eyes to how many, that we're going to need a lot of people involved to be able to make this happen.
So from that, I'm going to go ahead and share what our 7 priorities are that were brought forward to Sheep Genetics USA for us to focus on, so you guys can all see that. So in no particular order, we had a list basically of about 20, and then we went through and we got to vote 3 times. So our top 3 priorities all got heard, and these top 3, I can tell you, were heavily voted on. So 12 votes on those top 3. But then past that, just the 7 that came out of here. And I think that it's important that it looks like a bunch of young guns. It's just the way that it happened. We weren't shooting for young entrepreneurs or anything like that. But I think it's important to hear from you guys too, because there was a reason that we mistakenly got a huge room last year, and we should have had that big room again this year, because this morning it was packed, and it's pretty packed in here again. And so I think everyone is wanting to focus on, genetic improvement and progress. And so I'm going to put up a QR code here, and I want you to scan it, and I want you guys to take those 7 priorities. It's going to pull up on your phone, okay? And you're going to rank those, and you're going to tell Sheep Genetics USA what our how we should rank those 7 priorities starting in 2024. And then we're going to go back to the panel, but I think this is extremely important. So it should work. You should be able to do the QR code, and we should have an active poll here in a minute. Is it working for anyone? You're getting it? Yep. Thanks, Sarah. Sorry. Should have explained that. We have three people who have responded so far. This will be graded. Yes. You cannot come to genetic stakeholders next year if you do not finish this. I'm just kidding. We're getting there. So while the audience is doing that, the panel, why don't we talk about some of the we've been making some progress, addressing some of the topics that we discussed at the summit. But what do you think we can do as an industry or group to ensure we stay on task for developing these solutions? Yep. Again, they had this question, so.
That doesn't mean we actually did our homework.
Ryan does have an excuse because I had his wrong email somehow.
Yeah, I've never.
That's fine.
My kindergartner brings home homework, and I don't even remember doing homework in high school. So, well, I mean, ultimately, we've got to schedule additional meetings, and continue to keep talking about it. And then involve involve more people, get input from, a lot of Western range producers that potentially have interest in doing it, and, get their input on it, and then keep moving forward. But I think what we've narrowed it down to really will encompass a lot of what their concerns are, moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's easy there's such a broad scope of challenges. I think it's easy to get kind of caught in the rut of, during the headlights, where do you start? I think you pare it down, as we're attempting to do, to, 1 or 2 very primary focuses or priorities, and then you have to, as with anything else, define actionable steps and who is responsible to report back on that actionable step, so that, it's just got to be a step, but we need actionable steps forward.
I agree with that completely. It was our preliminary meeting as far as Young Guns was concerned, so the majority focus was just identifying what are our common problems, what are our common issues, and trying to then develop actionable goals that are tangible, that we can work on together. But I think the biggest thing, when we come to meetings like this or Young Guns or anything that we do, Lamb Summit. It's all really fun to come and hang out with your friends and neighbors and learn and grow. But if we don't take those things when we go back home and actually apply them to our own operations, then we're just having a fun chat, and that's great, but let's move the needle a little further.
Adoption of the practices.
Yeah, so I think there's opportunity. I think we all have different resources and skill sets available to us, and continuing to meet and have those discussions and figure out who has access to what and how can we leverage each individual's unique talents, whether they be within the Young Guns group or the greater industry, whether it be through NSIP, Sheep Genetics USA, genetic stakeholders. How can we use those resources to achieve these goals and priorities, and then keeping those groups accountable, keeping us accountable as well as other industry groups accountable, so that when we have that timeline, those benchmarks and those things we want to achieve each year moving forward, that actually happens and it doesn't just get lost in the busyness of life, but we keep it as a priority and keep moving forward on these things. So I think we need to just continue the discussion and not. I hope it doesn't just turn into just a meeting that happened once in time, but something that we can continue to build off of going forward.
All right, I want to open it up to the audience for some questions. I have backup if we need it, but I'd rather hear from you guys. I think this is really important that you guys have a voice as well for where you want the direction of Sheep Genetics USA to go. And we have all these experts up here that can tell you what we discussed for 2 days. Where's Weston? I know Weston has questions. I don't see him though. Yes, Dr. Murphy.
It's not really a question, but just in case you guys were wondering, this wasn't just a meeting where we drank beer and bitched about our dads. It was a really good meeting, and one that I walked away from very refreshed, that there's a lot of young people out there wanting to push a lot of the work that I do and others do on a daily basis. So it was the best meeting I've been to in a long time.
Thanks, Dr. Murphy. I agree. I think it really did push us out of our comfort zones a lot of times, and I think that's what we need sometimes is some other industry experts to challenge us, because some of the things that Lee asked us, he's like, wait, you haven't done that? Oh, so what have you guys done? And I think we can all agree that sometimes we ask ourselves that, and maybe that's why we're in the position that we're in. Other questions? Yes?
I'd like to hear from the four young men up there. What was the biggest eye-opening thing you found out about a production system that you're not familiar with at the meeting? Whether it was in the meeting or whether it was in the real meeting after the meeting.
For me, I guess I'm always reminded of the production systems and challenges in the Western Range region of the country. We deal with a lot of parasite issues and some predator issues, but I think they're fairly manageable in our part of the country. And then you hear from other folks that you consider to be really good producers and doing it at a very high level in their part of the country, and yet they continue to lose many lambs to predation issues, and I'm just reminded of those just geographical challenges that come with that, and we need to be realistic about what those things are and how we can solve those kind of maybe geographic specific issues. That and one of the interesting conversations, I think it was kind of a side conversation that was going on at one point. There was a gentleman from Western Range region and another individual from the Midwest region, very different, contrasting production systems, and they didn't know each other before the meeting, and so they were just kind of sharing some thoughts, and the one individual from the Western states was like, man, if we can get to just like 110, 120% lamb crop, man, that would be phenomenal. I mean, that would be a game changer. And the other individual from the Midwest, like, had this just crazy look on his face, like, man, if if I only weaned 120% lamb crop, I wouldn't be in business. I better have 200+%. And so it's just, I think it was a cool opportunity for all of us to, we didn't all know each other going into it, and there were those types of conversations that, both individuals want to increase ewe productivity and percentage of lamb weaned, but their starting point and the relative change that each one of them is looking for might vary quite a bit. And so just being realistic and understanding where we each come from was a really good opportunity with having such a diverse group there.
No, and just a little more on that as well, to just understand what your limits are, what your strengths are in your own operation. It varies so drastically in this industry, and it's so fun to learn, coming from a Western Range background, very low input type operation, to understand that some of the goals that we set for our types of operations are so drastically different than others. And like you said, in some operations, 120% lamb crop would be, oh man, a banger year. And in others, it would put you out of business. The other thing that I took away from it was just the availability for people to now collect data and measure things through EID tags and different technology that we couldn't do 15 years ago, and how much and how fast we can move that needle today versus where we were at even a decade ago is pretty incredible.
Yeah, and I probably need to echo those comments. One, just gaining a better comprehensive understanding of the different production systems within this country helps us as a whole maybe understand, one, neither is right nor wrong, but each correct in their own way given their environmental circumstances or feed resources, type of sheep, that sort of thing. So just an understanding of that and how maybe a Western Range producer makes the basis of their economic decisions with respect to someone like myself in a eastern, more farm flock, pasture based, but really a lot of intricate interaction with the sheep and partial confinement. So that just a broader understanding of the industry as a whole. And then also I was really impressed by we have the opportunity to interact with our sheep a fair bit, so don't have a lot of excuse for not having written something down periodically about them. But some of these Western Range flocks were keeping very good records and had just a relatively high-tech systems in place to monitor the production of their ewes. And I was very impressed by the fact that they had figured out time-efficient, manageable ways to accomplish measure these benchmarks on the range.
Yeah, I think anytime you get a bunch of really good people in the same room, it just elevates you as an individual. Not just, hearing the stories, but it's very refreshing for me to be around a bunch of people that really care about moving the needle with genetics and using NSIP data, because really moving forward, if we're gonna get traction on this thing, we need a lot of people to adopt those and hopefully be using an index of some sort in the future to help their operations be profitable. And then, talking about predation, I think moving forward, especially in Utah, just recently, there's probably going to need to be some talk about that, because there's been, and I'm not going to speak to them, but there's been some changes in Utah just recently that have a lot of producers pretty nervous about how we're going to deal with predation. So I think it's something that's going to need to be talked about.
Why are people not using protection dogs?
Well, you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I will. It's a challenge for different environments. Actually, I guess what came to mind first when we were discussing, or with that question, I was recently at the University of Wyoming and did a very similar thing to the Young Guns that Dr. Stewart had us come do, and they had just got some BLM donkeys and hennies to use as protection dogs, and their reasoning behind that, where the university sheep flock is located is right off the highway in a pretty residential area, and so there's students around all the time, and so for various reasons, they decided to use donkeys instead of just out of the liability of what happens if a dog bites a student or something, or the neighbor, or kills the neighbor's dog or something like that. For us personally on our own operation, it's been a long time since we've used guard dogs. We run our sheep very similar to fenced cattle operation. It works well, dual purpose with our cattle. It's a lot more efficient. Managing those dogs can be a huge challenge, especially in a vast pasture. Our average pasture size is probably about 3,500 acres, and we'll have anywhere from 5 to 2,000 ewes in there, depending on the time of year. So to ask a dog or two to cover that much country and keep predators away when the sheep get pretty spread out and aren't herded can be a challenge.
Llamas?
We have tried llamas. We have not tried donkeys. Our neighbors to the north have tried donkeys. The challenge with donkeys that you see most commonly is you cannot put more than one in a group because they are herd-bound animals as well. So they start to identify with horses, or if there's 2 donkeys, they'll leave the herd and assimilate in their own herds.
Tom, you had a question?
Yeah, and probably more of a comment actually, and that is that as we strategized to put together the whole Young Guns idea a year ago, the idea was that it would only be you young guys. None of us old dogs were going to be invited in. We weren't even permitted to attend. And that's because you guys are the future of this industry. You guys are the ones that, and maybe you look at it, we look at it as your parents were the ones that laid the foundation on which you're building today, but what the sheep industry looks like in 2035 is on your shoulders, and that's why we wanted you there. That's why the whole thing was put together that way. You need to drive that. You need to drive what's needed for your operation, and you will find a lot of commonality there. You need to drive that to the researchers, to the extension, to the outreach, to the specialists, to every sector of this industry to make it the industry what it's going to be in 10 years from now. So I just think it was a wonderful event. I compliment you guys for your leadership in being able to attend that, put out your time to do that, and then to make the necessary arrangements to be here and continue this on, because our vision was that this is only the beginning and that it just builds and escalates from here.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate that. I just wanted to add to the guard dog thing. I think protection dogs they work really good. In our area, we use them, but predators are smart. We've used a llama as well, and in large pastures, they'll figure out where the llama's at, and they'll kill over the hill. So it helps for sure, but there's other methods that the state of Utah has been using, including our government trappers, and there's some changes being made there that we're pretty concerned about. So.
Other questions? Rusty?
One of the priorities listed were some changes to NSIP. Would you mind maybe expanding a little bit on whether we spent quite a bit of time talking about that?
The costs.
My ego's just gotten back to normal after the meeting, so can you bring me back down a little bit?
I think, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but we talked about addressing the costs to where it would benefit, a larger producer who's putting a lot of value into the genetics pool to help them as far as the cost goes, and then we basically said that we needed to get rid of Pedigree Master and start over and try to find the software, and I think that's up there. But we were thinking a software that's in the United States, We wanted it here in the United States, so if we're gonna spend money, we're gonna pay somebody, we'll pay somebody here in the US.
Yeah, I think Gavin said that pretty well. I know historically, there's NSIP on a large scale has been an expensive endeavor in terms of trying to get a lot of producer buy-in, and I think Dr. Lewis did a good job this morning of underscoring the value in a large, a large number of flocks contributing data points. And so maybe the restructuring of the NSIP fee structure will help encourage flocks that were on the fence and recognize and value those benefits, but just haven't quite been there, felt the cost justifiable. Maybe this will help them take those next steps.
I do want it on record that Rusty threw himself under the bus. But you're right, we did spend a lot of time on it, and I think as far as improving genetics as an industry whole, NSIP is going to be a huge forefront for us, and continue to work and grow and develop it to become not only a better and more efficient program, but also something that's a little easier and more producer-friendly to use. I'm darn sure no tech whiz by any means. So the easier something is as far as inputting data and getting tangible data back, the more people you're going to get involved in it. Just working to create a more efficient system is what I took away from it mostly.
Yeah, and I'll echo all that, and some of the other things we talked about as well, incentivizing maybe some of the more difficult to measure traits, and some of the things I mentioned previously, and how can we start to measure some of those novel traits, maybe incentivize folks to develop and collect phenotypes on those traits. And also I think we had some discussion on how can we work with commercial producers who are using NSIP RAMs to collect larger data sets and be able to utilize all those phenotypes to go back into and contribute towards identifying those genetically superior individuals. So how can we capitalize on those large flocks that are taking advantage of NSIP on the RAM side, even though their U flock may not be enrolled? And so how can we, I don't know if we came up with a specific solution to that yet, but it's one thing that's kind of out there and an opportunity that's available if we can figure out how to capitalize on that, and maybe some of that will come along with how we streamline data collection and the tools and technology that we implement in the future to make that a little bit easier and more straightforward.
And I would just kind of underscore what Andrew said. It was a general consensus that NSIP is a phenomenal tool and will continue to be moving forward. We talked about at the Young Guns Forum, there may be a time, and everybody's touched on it already so far today, that we need to refocus what traits are of major economic importance. Like we've used NSIP for years now. We've seen for those harnessing that tool a lot of genetic progress on those traits that have been focused. It's been modeled, it's been demonstrated, it's been seen in practice on farm. But we're probably missing, and Andrew touched on some, we're probably missing at this point some key economic trait driving factors that aren't being evaluated by or in the starting processes of being a part of NSIP for selection tool, and that's health and wellness, mastitis. So if you look at economic profitability on a sheep farm, we've traditionally measured that in number of lambs weaned or pounds of lambs weaned per ewe, which is excellent. But if we take that a step further, you don't actually get paid until those lambs reach the market. And if you have an excessive call rate because you lack health and wellness, a lot of mastitis, OPP. And so if you have an excessive call rate and you're retaining a high percentage of your females, it thus reduces profitability of that flock because you're not getting as many of those lambs. Even though on paper, to weaning, she looked great, you're not getting as many of those lambs to market. And so, and that's not being measured by NSIP at this time very well. We don't take it to that step. We're not there. And those are traits that we discuss that I think have pretty big impacts, speaking especially for myself on a commercial side, to the economic driving factors moving forward. And I view that as a focus point.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna add, if you are a commercial flock using NSIP rams, there are things out there right now that there's a NSIP influenced commercial use cells that you can use. There's things out there right now that you can use to benefit you. But yeah, just using some of those traits to maybe just one or two small things, or just like the OPP test is was when the light turned on for me. If you could get somebody started just using that, and then, build upon that from there.
I think we have time for one more question if anyone has one.
Quick comment on your top one there. Develop software that doesn't only work on PCs. We shouldn't have to go buy another computer, right, to pick up this software. I've been talking to Shearwell for 3 years to get something on a Mac. Not everybody's a PC user.
Right, yeah.
While you're developing your software.
No, good point. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Well, life's boring without a few challenges, and you guys all look like you like a challenge. So, of these 7, which one would you be the CEO of solving, and why? Which one would you take on that you'd be excited about figuring out why? Maybe you don't remember all 7.
Do you need it? I have the list.
No, I don't know.
Quick answers.
Who invited you?
Here's the list of 7. If you need help.
Yeah, so for me, I think NSIP does a lot of great work. I think if we look at other livestock sectors, genomics and genomic enhanced NSIP data, or EBVs, is kind of the next step, and maybe a tool that it seems like all facets of this industry can utilize, so I feel like that is a fairly high priority. I don't know that does you any good, though, without the software to handle this data. Like, it's been demonstrated that if you get 2 flocks submitting enough data to enough phenotypical data to create this genomics database, it's going to do you no good. So unless you provide ease of use software that will facilitate broad adoption across the industry, it won't do any good.
One more person, so rock, paper, scissors.
I was just going to second what Isaac said. I would jump on the software bandwagon. I think that if we can get that right and make it as easy and straightforward as possible to collect the phenotypes shoot side and have that to our genetic evaluation program, I think that allows us to do the first and the second priorities up there. It opens the door for us to look at new and novel traits, because if we already have the software in place to get that to the evaluation, now we can start looking at how we can measure additional traits, and then just insert that into an existing platform. And then we start talking about large-scale phenotyping and genomic evaluation. That's only going to be possible if we have the easy, straightforward system to be able to do that for our large-scale commercial producers to be able to collect those phenotypes on a large contemporary group. So that's where I'd place my priority.
I don't know. I'm not a CEO.
Well,
My title is GSD, get shit done. And I'm like way below the CEO. So I have all these smart guys that come up with these ideas, and then I just help carry them out.
All right, we are a little over time, but I think it was really important. You can see why we chose these individuals. to help keep us accountable. And we plan on having some more updates for you guys by next year, and these will hopefully all be solved. So thanks, guys.